The original Star Wars trilogy remains timeless even decades after its release. Whereas most films would fall victim of being products of their time, these three films still resonate with a wide variety of audiences. However, as the years went by, the Star Wars franchise would see a steep decline in quality due to it being in the hands of a director who forgot what made his films great to begin with. But then, a miracle happened. George Lucas sold the rights to Disney.
These wounds won't seem to heal. This pain is just too real. There's just so much that time cannot erase.
I want to ride my bicycle. I want to ride my bike. I want to ride my bicycle. I want to ride it where I like. You say black, I say white. You say bar, I say bite. You say shark, I say him. And Jaws was never my scene, and I don't like Star Wars.
Don't you ever say it's just a film.
It's not just a film.
Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Yup, it's bad. As someone who thoroughly enjoyed both The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, the scatterbrained nature of Rise of Skywalker really does put this new trilogy into perspective. As it turns out, having no outline for where a story is going to lead to, while giving each film a different writer and director with a different vision, isn't the most practical way to create a trilogy. Not that I ever thought this was a great idea, I just didn't think much of it since that's basically how the original trilogy was planned. But keep in mind, it was just a different time back then. Trilogies, franchise films, and cinematic universes just weren't the standard in those days, and trilogies in particular were the exception, not the rule. And yeah, for a trilogy with no outline, the original Star Wars films flow pretty well, but there were a few chinks in the armor when it came to Return of the Jedi. Obi-Wan's bullshit explanation as to why he never told Luke the truth about his father tells me that the twist in Empire wasn't planned from the beginning. Also, I know everyone points this out, but you cannot sit there with a straight face and tell me that this was planned.
Leia's my sister.
Hi Mark Hamill, I'm somewhat curious about this picture. What happened here? All the best, Jason.
The moment I realized I kissed my sister.
But regardless of its flaws, I still consider Return of the Jedi to be a mostly satisfying conclusion to the original trilogy. Rise of Skywalker, on the other hand, was just a clusterfuck. So if you're watching this video, chances are you've either seen the movie yourself and feel the exact same way that I do, or you've seen other reviewers talk about how bad or at least mediocre the movie really is. So instead of boring you with yet another video that brings up all of the same points that others have made about the movie itself, I'm going to shed a light on one aspect of the film that I don't think enough of these other reviewers are talking about or at least giving proper context to. I am of course talking about the production of this film. You see, when this movie was first released, everyone who hated it was quick to blame J.J. Abrams for how bad the movie was. On the surface, this is pretty understandable considering the fact that he's, you know, the director, but you have to remember, working in Hollywood is a little more complicated than that. One moment you could be working on something brilliant, original, mind-blowing, complex, something that pushes the medium to new heights. And the next moment, your movie could be given to a studio that turns it into something that's nothing like what you wanted, and yet it still has your name on it. Even as I was watching Rise of Skywalker, I had this nagging thought in the back of my mind that there was a lot of studio meddling behind this film. Now I should take a moment here and talk about the source behind this information. This information comes from an anonymous source on Reddit that claims to have been close to Abrams while he was working for Disney. Now I know a lot of you are hearing this and probably thinking,
Done.
but seriously, hear me out on this. This might be the same source that leaked the script for Rise of Skywalker months in advance. And as time went by and more clips and screen caps of the movie were being released, those leaks were proven to be true. So personally, I trust this source. And I think it's important to spread this information in a video format so more people are aware of the shitty things that go on behind the scenes. I mean, that's just how most people absorb information nowadays. It's kind of the whole reason why audiobooks are more popular than books. I mean, why stare at all these boring words when someone can just read them for you? I mean, look at this shit. Look at all the text they expected you to sit there and stare at in 1817, whatever the fuck. You think I'm gonna read all this shit in this day and age? No. Also, after reading these leaks, it's apparent to me that a review of the production of the movie is far more interesting than a review of the movie itself. Especially when I can just insert my thoughts on the film just by talking about where most of the movie's fuck-ups came from. Alright, enough stalling, let's talk about these leaks. So according to this source, Disney was one of the companies involved in a bidding war that happened around a year ago for Bad Robot. For those of you who don't know what Bad Robot is, it's the TV and film company that was founded and led by J.J. Abrams himself, and is responsible for shows such as Lost, Fringe, Alias, and movies such as Super 8 and the Cloverfield films. And obviously some other films you're probably more familiar with, but we'll get to that. Disney never really had that much interest in Bad Robot as a company, but they had a lot of interest in Abrams himself. The man was really good at bringing back franchises such as Star Trek, Mission Impossible, and of course, Star Wars. Another company that had a lot of interest in J.J. Abrams was Warner Brothers. Now, let me ask you this. What other studios do these companies own? Well, with Disney, they own Marvel Studios, the studio with the highest grossing movie of all time, Avengers Endgame, and the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe to back it up. As for Warner Brothers, they own DC Comics.
Fuck Batman.
You know, the studio that, ever since Christopher Nolan left, have tried desperately, and I mean desperately tried to one-up Marvel Cinematic Universe and failed miserably, and are just now digging themselves out of that hole by making movies that are actually worth a damn. So considering Abrams' history of successfully rebooting film franchises, Marvel's biggest threat was for him to move to DC Comics and to create a successful, audience-pleasing Superman reboot, which I have to admit, I would totally watch that. Now keep in mind, what I'm about to say is the source's word, not mine, but apparently Disney's goal in this bidding war was to make J.J. Abrams look bad to potential shareholders. Now in the end, Abrams ended up moving to Warner Brothers anyway, but I think the big takeaway from this anecdote should be this. There are a lot of great filmmakers working in Hollywood today, but if you're as big as J.J. Abrams, there is a very good chance that you'll be treated less like an artist and more like a pawn in a game of chess by two studios. So as the source states, the version of The Rise of Skywalker that played at the premiere was not the version that the cast and crew thought they worked on. This completely disappointed JJ because of the ridiculous demands that Disney made to change his story. While the scenes were shot, a lot of the changes were made in post-production. A lot of the audio was redone and altered, all behind J.J. Abrams' back. Now, the source states that no one on Abrams' crew had seen anything like this before, but if you pay close attention to film history, this isn't the first time that something like this has happened to a movie. Terry Gilliam's movie Brazil is a good example of what I'm talking about. The film was meant to be a dark comedic take on George Orwell's 1984. However, when the movie was given to Universal Studios, an edit of the film was made behind Terry's back in an attempt to pander to American audiences. This edit made loads of changes, including, but not limited to, cutting a whole hour out of the movie, changing the opening, and worst of all, giving the movie a happy ending that made no sense and completely missed the point of the film. If you want to work in the film industry, it's important to know that this kind of shit can happen to your movie. Thankfully, Gilliam was able to catch this edit before it premiered in America and fought against its release, but apparently there was no such luck with The Rise of Skywalker. It should also be noted that JJ apparently felt threatened by Disney over the month leading up to the premiere, so JJ's original agreement when being signed on to Rise of Skywalker was that he would have more creative control on this film than on The Force Awakens. It only took a couple of weeks into shooting for the studio meddling to begin. JJ wanted to do some scenes that he thought were important, but Disney shut it down citing budgetary reasons. Budgetary reasons? Budgetary reasons? You're not fucking Troma, you're Disney, a company run by billionaires. You mean to tell me that you guys can afford to recreate movies that we've already seen a billion times as a kid, but you can't afford to add crucial scenes to the last Star Wars film? Hopefully last Star Wars film? The quote-unquote ending that will blow your mind was one of these scenes. Older actors were supposed to be a part of this scene, such as Hayden Christensen, Ewan McGregor, and Samuel L. Jackson. The Force ghosts weren't meant to be voices because they shot that footage on camera. Rey was supposed to be surrounded by the Force ghosts to serve as some sort of barrier between her and the Sith surrounding them. That actually does explain a lot. You ever notice during the last confrontation with Rey and Palpatine, the Sith just sit there instead of helping take Rey down? I wasn't really invested in the film at this point, but I gotta admit, it would have been at least kind of interesting to see all of the Jedi from the past take down what's left of the Sith. Plus, cutting this out creates a giant plot hole in the film. If Force Ghost Luke can lift this entire X-Wing off the ground, then what's stopping all of the other Force ghosts from helping take down the Sith? Now, this hasn't been 100% confirmed by the source, but he thinks that the whole Force ghost thing is China's fault. I mean, no shit, what isn't these days, am I right? Now, to be honest, this part of the leaks kind of confuses me. Some of the visual effects people claim that they could only use certain shades of blue for the Force ghosts. Fucking really? I know the Chinese government is pretty strict when it comes to pretty much everything because they're, you know, fascists. But are there seriously shades of blue and other colors that are banned from the country? Why? Does this mean if I take a vacation in China, I can't watch David Jarman's Blue without getting arrested?
You make him cry out, saying, "O blue, come forth. O blue, arise. O blue, ascend."
If you guys care about movies as much as I do, then China's involvement in the entertainment industry should really concern you at this point. They play a big role of what makes a movie successful in the foreign markets, hence why we have so many damn Transformers films. And apparently, we can't have a certain shade of blue in a movie without having it get banned from China. So, I guess J.J. Abrams isn't exactly the yelling type, but apparently he got so frustrated with the meddling of his film. In a meeting with executives, he yelled, "Why don't you put written and directed by Lucasfilm then?" J.J. Abrams, confirmed badass. The leaks also state that Disney demanded for scenes to be added to the film for the sole purpose of merchandising, the most infamous of these scenes being this one.
Oh, they fly now!
They fly now?
They fly now!
Yup, this was also the first scene in the movie that was officially released on the internet by Disney, and everyone rightfully hated it.
I mean, like, you know, when 3PO said it, I was like, that's not so bad. And then when What's-His-Face said it, and the other What's-His-Face said it, I was like, okay.
Jetpacks are a technology that have been established in Star Wars since before the events of the prequels. Boba Fett was literally using one in Episode 6, and all of a sudden our heroes are caught off guard by the existence of these things. Finn was with the First Order since he was a child. He was trained to eventually become a member of their military force. There is no way that he never learned about them having jetpacks before this scene. And even then, why is it a jetpack that surprises them? They literally live in a universe with planet-sized laser cannons, flying spaceships, bombs that apparently defy the rules of gravity, sentient robots, and light-speed travel. Jetpacks are literally small potatoes compared to that stuff.
Yeah, you know, it was such a good line that it just, everybody needs to say it. Everybody needs to say it. I hope, I think Daisy Ridley should have said it too. I think the little robot, the little volleyball-looking motherfucking droid should have said it. And, I think the speeder they were driving should have grown a face and said it.
It's also JJ's least favorite scene. At a November screening of a 2-hour and 37-minute cut, he cringed, groaned, and laughed when the scene was on.
And how transparent of Disney to have the first scene in the movie to be released to the public be nothing more than an ad space for a toy.
Oh, they fly now!
Now we have the First Order Jet Trooper.
The First Order driver in Tread Speeder.
They fly now?
And real quick, taking a look at the jetpack, I really like the design of this. Again, the paint and sculpt on it looks really good.
The First Order can't afford speeder bikes, so we're going with Tread Speeders. Yeah, I don't know.
So there's this interview with J.J. Abrams where he's being asked about the criticisms towards Rise of Skywalker, and according to the source, Abrams was most likely being serious with his response.
What would you say to people who don't like what happens or wish it was something different? Is there a problem with the fandom that... No, I'd say that they're right.
Oof. That's fucking sad. I remember when The Force Awakens came out, he was showing nothing but enthusiasm for that film.
But in the conversation, that question of this young woman asking, who is Luke Skywalker? I don't know why, but it made me feel like, fuck, that's so cool. That idea that there would be a discovery. These would be, you know, essentially kids who didn't see Star Wars themselves in this movie, who would be in this universe. But
that turned you on.
Yes, the idea of sort of rediscovering this world that had been created.
Even if you don't like J.J. Abrams as a filmmaker, it's kind of hard not to feel his pain here. So if you look at the runtime for Rise of Skywalker, the movie clocks in at 2 hours and 22 minutes. JJ's original cut of the film was 3 hours and 2 minutes. This explains so much. I can sit here and explain every single plot detail that got on my nerves and that I do consider legitimate flaws with the movie. However, there's just one major flaw with the film that pretty much dragged down the entire experience for me. This movie's pacing is fucking awful. I mean, my god, the movie just throws so much at you in terms of plot, characters, planets, and the movie just doesn't give itself enough time to breathe or really develop on anything it brings up. It reminded me so much of Ralph Bakshi's version of The Lord of the Rings in this regard. And if you've been paying attention to my channel for the past year, you know I don't take that as a good sign. I'm not saying that JJ's 3-hour cut would have been a masterpiece, but I seriously get the feeling that it would have fixed a lot of the issues I had with the pacing. Over a period of 9 months, JJ started realizing that one by one, his ideas and whole scenes were being thrown out the window or entirely altered by people who have no business meddling with the creatives. You know, I wonder if the dynamic between Finn and Jana was one of those ideas that was being altered or thrown out the window. When they first meet, it's revealed that Jana was also a stormtrooper that turned on the First Order, and it's heavily implied that it was the will of the Force that made them come to the realization that war is evil, and that there are more ex-troopers out there. And the movie just doesn't do dick with this idea throughout the rest of the film, and that really got on my nerves because I love Finn as a character, and this would have been a great way to add more depth to him. Abrams and Disney were not on the same page when it came to creative decisions, and it became obvious that Disney had an agenda in addition to wanting to please shareholders. Disney could afford messing up on Episode 9 for the sake of the bigger picture when it came to protecting things unrelated to Episode 9. Well, that's fucking depressing. Disney could not afford to mess up Endgame, but as for the supposed final chapter to a saga of films that stretch all the way back to 1977 and completely revolutionized movies, yeah, we can screw up this one time, who cares? The cut JJ eventually and hesitantly agreed to in early December was 2 hours and 37 minutes long. The cut that played at the premiere was 2 hours and 22 minutes. Apart from the Force Ghosts, there were other crucial and emotional scenes missing. The cut they released looked chopped and taped back together with weak Scotch tape. Crucial and emotional scenes, eh? Yeah, remember that devastating scene where Chewbacca realizes that all the friends he made in the original trilogy are now dead, and his sadness just disappears after 2 minutes? But in all seriousness, go on YouTube and watch the deleted scenes for The Last Jedi. This isn't the first time Disney cut out crucial and emotional scenes for no reason. So the next couple of bullet points are just talking about scenes that were cut from the movie. Some of this stuff is interesting, but it wasn't really anything I could comment on. The source better explains Kylo's turn to the good, as it was clumsily explained in the film. You can pause and read that if you want to. I don't really have that much to say about it, and I was gonna read it myself, but I thought it took too much time considering I didn't really have anything to add to it. The leaks also mentioned that Rose Tycho was going to have a bigger role. Despite all of the backlash this character got from her role in The Last Jedi, Abrams still wanted to give Rose a meaningful arc. However, this was just shot down because Disney thought it was too risky. Screenwriter Chris Terrio states that this was all because of the scenes with Leia, but apparently this is only half true because she had 4 scenes without Leia, and in the final film, she was only given about 2 minutes of screen time. Holy shit! This got on my nerves. I'd be lying if I said she was the most interesting thing about The Last Jedi, but there was at least room for improvement. She wasn't a character that was broken beyond repair like Jar Jar Binks. Personally, I'm okay with the idea of this nerdy loner in the Resistance joining in the fight to stand up for what she believes in, but having that just not lead up to anything in Rise of Skywalker just feels like a cowardly move on Disney's part. And look, I realize there are people out there who had legitimate complaints about Rose Tycho that had nothing to do with her race or anything petty like that. I am not blaming you guys for what happened to Rose in this film. Hell, I'm not even blaming the actual racists that went after Kelly Marie Tran, even though I have zero empathy for those kinds of people. Putting the blame entirely on those guys are giving them too much credit. I blame Disney for bending over to those literal retards of America, because that's seriously what this decision feels like to me. So if you really like Finn as a character like I do, you might want to sit down for this one. Finn wanting to tell Rey something was always meant to be Force sensitivity. In the 3-hour cut, it's explicitly stated. There was a moment when Jana and Finn were running on top of that Star Destroyer. Finn needed to unlock or move something, and he used the Force and acted surprised when it happened. Wow! Wouldn't that have been awesome? Wouldn't that have added something of substance to the film? This was replaced with a CGI'd BB-8 fixing whatever needed to be fixed on the ship. God! Fuck off, Disney. This would have been such a cool addition to Finn's character, and a moment like this would have stood out from the rest of the film as something great. Why cut it? I don't even remember the scene that replaced it. That's how bland it was. Babu Frick was nearly cut because some execs at Disney thought he would be the new Jar Jar. They are really surprised that people love him this much. He was JJ's idea and was created in collaboration with some artists and puppeteers. The personality was all JJ. I don't know, I thought this little shit was kind of annoying, so take that info however you like. So the next 3 bullet points are about the scenes with Kylo Ren and Rey. To sum up, Kylo's redemption arc was a lot more detailed and structured, instead of abrupt like it is in the final film. But one detail I wanted to highlight was this point right here. JJ was against the Reylo kiss, or just Reylo in general. This was Disney's attempt to please both sides of the fandom. To all you normies that don't know what Reylo is, it's the fandom pairing Rey and Kylo as a couple. To a lot of people, this shit is just really cringy. The whole Reylo shit really took off after Last Jedi, because I guess people speculated there was some sexual tension between Rey and Kylo. I could see Kylo being attracted to Rey since the First Order was a total sausage fest, but Rey seemed more interested in turning him to the light side because he was Leia's son before he was Kylo. By the time the movie ends, it seems like she accepted the fact that Kylo was most likely corrupted for good, and the Reylo shit should have just ended there. So yeah, that Reylo kiss near the end of the movie, it definitely felt like fanfiction, and it just didn't make a whole lot of sense to Rey's character. I know all y'all hate Rian Johnson, but honestly, you think this is what he meant by catering to fans is a bad idea? In The Last Jedi, he seems to be actively trying to prove that a Reylo relationship wouldn't work even if she tried. And then Disney decided to throw that out the window because, fuck it, I guess we gotta make these perverts happy. So the last bullet points are mostly concluding statements with an addendum at the very end. The first 2 mostly talk about Abrams himself and how jaded he was at the whole experience. Star Wars meant the world to him and he really didn't want to mess this up, and instead it turned into a complete nightmare. This is honestly really sad. I remember that enthusiasm Abrams had when he was promoting The Force Awakens. It didn't even seem that long ago.
The amazing thing for me was, when I watched the movie as a kid, seeing those droids on, the deserts of Tatooine. I didn't know it was Tunisia, I didn't remember, but I knew it was real. It felt authentic. And it was really important to us that everywhere we possibly could, we did that. So we could have done a lot of things, but we went to Abu Dhabi, we went to Ireland and into the forests of Wales and shot plates in Iceland and built these enormous sets, interior and exterior, because we wanted the movie to never feel like it was shot in a vacuum.
JJ, what happened to Darth Vader's grandchildren?
Oh, George. This is great. You tell me, man. You made all this shit up.
What would you say to people who don't like what happens or wish it was something different? Is there a problem with the fandom that... No, I'd say that they're right.
Now this last bullet point is more political related stuff, so if you don't like hearing about it, I don't know what else to tell you. So for the past couple of years, Disney has had this habit of announcing that one of their characters will have a certain sexuality that isn't straight, and then doing little to nothing with that idea once the movie is released. I first noticed this when the remake of Beauty and the Beast came out and they announced that LeFou would be gay, which was kinda pointless since they didn't really do a whole lot to show that, and all he is the sidekick for the villain. They did the same thing to Solo: A Star Wars Story by announcing that Lando was pansexual because he wanted to fuck a robot, which isn't even a new idea when it comes to science fiction. And if you were paying close attention to the ending of Rise of Skywalker, you might have noticed this 5-second lesbian kiss scene that added nothing to the film. Now, I am all for LGBT representation in cinema, but all this bare minimum representation does is irritate everyone on all sides of the argument.
Dear filmmakers of Hollywood, you will get praise for representation when you introduce queer characters who aren't so intentionally minor that they can be edited out for foreign audiences. The bare minimum is never something that is worthy of being commended, and saying that it is implies that it should be normalized for Hollywood to constantly tote the will of bigoted nations overseas.
I really didn't care about these two background characters, but I guess I have to now just because they've kissed each other. The proper way to represent a marginalized group of people is simple. Just write them like you would any other character. Make them feel real to the audience, make us like them and care about them, and reveal their marginalized traits in a way that feels honest and consistent with their character. And guess what? Everything that I mentioned about proper representation, that is exactly what J.J. Abrams wanted to do, and Disney completely shot it down. The source asked about Finpo after seeing Oscar Isaac's comment about how Disney didn't want it to be a thing. This is true. JJ fought to make this happen. This is why Oscar is blaming Disney. It's not just a throwaway comment. He knows for a fact that it was Disney because these discussions happened. The main cast is insanely close with JJ and are just as pissed, though seemingly more outspoken about it than JJ. During The Force Awakens, Disney was hesitant to hire John Boyega because a woman was front and center, so they deemed that risky enough. So bringing in a male lead who's black made them nervous. JJ fought to make that happen for about 9 months before getting approval. The same issue came up when JJ fought to have Finn and Poe as a couple in Rise of Skywalker, but he lost that battle as he lost many creative battles for this film. Many people, JJ included, came to the realization during this production that the story is really told by shareholders and investors instead of the creatives or anyone at Disney specifically. He tried to make a lot of things happen and was shut down because of this. They had him on a leash, and many blame The Last Jedi for the stricter creative approach. I guess the big takeaway from this info should be this. When a billion-dollar corporation tells you that they care about you as an individual, you should take it with a huge grain of salt. I know a lot of people criticize the diversity aspect in the new trilogy out of ignorance, but there is a huge chunk of people out there who criticized it because you as an individual deserve better. You deserve an African American character that feels fully thought out. You deserve a Korean American character with a completed arc, instead of being tossed aside to appease psychopaths. And most of all, you deserve way more than just a few seconds of representation. Because those few seconds can easily be cut out to appease foreign governments that hate you for being who you are. So, now you know why Rise of Skywalker turned out the way it did. With all of this being said, would a 3-hour director's cut really fix all of this movie's issues? Honestly, I don't know. As the leaks state, Abrams' cut of the film still exists, but it's likely that we will never see it unless it gets leaked to the public. And one thing the leaker never brings up is, whose idea was it to bring back the Emperor? Regardless of who was responsible for that creative decision, it was the first sign that this movie probably wasn't going to be very good. Don't get me wrong, I love the Emperor, but it's hard for me to get invested into his character when his inclusion feels so desperate. Nothing about him was foreshadowed in the previous 2 films. And overall, I would have been way more invested if they just came up with a new villain or conflict altogether. Or hell, make Kylo Ren the main villain after Rey rejected his incel ass. The leaks also fail to mention who came up with the idea that Rey is the granddaughter of the Emperor. Not only did this feel like bad fanfiction, but it erased one of the things that I loved about The Last Jedi, the fact that Rey came from nowhere. This, along with Finn being Force sensitive, would have restored the original idea that a great Jedi can come from literally anywhere. You don't even have to be the offspring of a Jedi to be in tune with the Force.
Luminous beings, so we, not this crude matter.
But one last question on my mind is, should this movie, and especially these leaks, make me think less of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi? Honestly, that's kind of a loaded question. The last time I watched these 2 films was pretty recent, actually. I marathoned all of the Star Wars films that I cared to watch, and when I got to these 2 films, I still enjoyed them quite a lot, warts and all. But that was before I watched Rise of Skywalker and before these leaks came out. I'm usually pretty good at separating the art from the artist if what they make is exceptionally good, but I don't know when will be the next time I'll be able to watch these films, or if I'll be able to watch them without those leaks in the back of my mind. I mean, this obviously can't change my initial experience with these films. Watching The Force Awakens opening night was probably the most fun I've had in a movie theater, aside from watching Inception on IMAX, because honestly, what can beat that? As for The Last Jedi, watching Luke Skywalker go through a fall from grace and then a redemption arc gave me an entirely new appreciation for a character that I already loved. But man, times have really changed in the grand scheme of things. When I rebooted this channel into a movie reviewing site, My first video was a glowing review for The Force Awakens. Years later, all of the infighting for The Last Jedi was so annoying that it killed any motivation I had for talking about that film. And here we are now, in the current year. Rise of Skywalker is just a bad film, and the production of this new trilogy is nothing more than a reminder of everything wrong with Hollywood. Well, at least we still got Mandalorian. The only thing that can ruin that are degenerates online.
Hey, how old is Baby Yoda in the... Like, how many years, canonically? Is he actually legal? Because that's a good argument for the lolly debate. 50 years old?
What was your reaction to the end of the movie? But don't use words, okay? I'm going to count you and do it all at the same time. 3, 2, 1.